Open your Bibles to 2 Kings chapter 6 today. 2 Kings chapter 6. We're still in the series. It's kind of a two-parter. We're talking about cultivate. Now we're talking about cultivating hands. The first part of our series, we really took time to talk about the preparation of the heart, the work of the heart. But Jesus spoke about the heart and how it is the determiner on how we receive his word or don't receive his word, and what effect his word can have in our heart. And we talked about how he helps us and works with us in preparing a place for him so we can keep growing in these things. Today, we turn the page a little bit to the second part of this, and we start talking about tools. We start talking about practical things. How many of you know when you're gardening, you use different tools for different things, right? So when you're trying to trim a bush and kind of cut it down and shape it, you use a rake. Am I right? We all take the rake out and we start, trying to rake the bush into the right way. No, we don't do that. And we don't use a trowel to try to saw off a limb. Am I right? There are certain tools that are better or more effective at accomplishing different aspects of gardening or cultivating. The whole idea of cultivating is this idea of promoting growth. It's a two-part process. God is doing his part, we're doing our part. He does the hard work, by the way. He does the hard work. We do the easy work. We do the easy work of yielding to his work, his process. We do the easy work of repenting and humbling ourselves. We do the easy work of calling out and being dependent on him to change and transform us, saying yes to him. That's the easy work. You know what the hard work is? It's transforming us from the inside out. Changing our attitudes, our appetites, our desires, changing our mindset on things. That's the hard work. It's the work of the soul. And the Holy Spirit living in you, if you have come to faith in Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit living in you is committed to this work. And even as we took a time last week to look at the Father is the gardener. He's the one actually tending to your fruitfulness, your life, saying, you are the most important thing to me. You're what I have my attention on. Everything that goes on in your life, don't worry, whether it's good or bad, I'm going to be using it to bring you closer to the vine, who is Jesus, that there might come out of your life more and more fruitfulness. This was last week. So today, this next part of the series, they're all going to start with A, just so you know, because that's stupid pastor things that we do. And I'm talking about awareness, because instead of just talking about one tool at a time, I wanted to take some time to look at the concepts of what different tools help us understand about God in our life, or to recognize about God in our life. And this first concept is just simple awareness. Awareness. The awareness of the presence of God. How aware are you of God's presence throughout the day? Just stop for a minute. Ask yourself that question. I've been asking people all week that question. How aware are you of the presence of God? And it's interesting because some points I was a little surprised. I was expecting people to say, honestly, I was expecting people to say, I'm really not aware. I don't really recognize his presence very much in my life, except when I'm at church on Sunday. But then I didn't hear a lot of that. I got a little bit of that. Mostly I was hearing things like, oh yeah, I'm aware. I know he's with me. But then as I pressed in a little bit, just a little bit more, but what does it mean that you know that he's with you? Like, what difference actually has it made, or does it make? I'm just curious, because I wanted to know what they understood of the presence of God. Have you ever been in a conversation, maybe at work, just going at it with somebody, and then somebody else that you respected walked into the room, and all of a sudden the conversation changed? Just by their presence? Why? Why? Well, maybe the content of what you were talking about was not something you wanted them to hear, or maybe you were maybe showing a side of yourself that you're like, I don't want them to see this part of my ugly. You with me? But when you take this truth and you make it really, really practical, you realize the presence of God, knowing He's actually with me throughout the day, all day long, definitely changes things. It will change stuff. I want to start with a story, Old Testament story. It's a great one because some of you haven't heard this story, and it's one of those you just got to know. It's a really cool one. And it really kind of illustrates the difference of one person living in the reality of God's presence and another living without the reality of God's presence, and literally God opening his eyes to see what he didn't see about the presence of God. It's a really cool story like that, a few little principles. But then we're going to kind of go on a couple more and look at other practical ways understanding the presence of God with us can affect our life. 4 things that we'll probably get to today. That's the hope. We're going to look at fearless living. So when we understand God's presence with us, it changes. So we become a whole lot more fearless in the way we're living. And that's been our theme. That is our theme for the year. So everything kind of coming back to that. We're going to look at everyday living. Every day, the mundane. Every day is different. Even the mundane can be different. We're going to talk about godly living. There's a certain reality of the fear of the Lord in my life when I know He's here, He's with me, He's watching, He's walking into the room right now as I'm yelling at my wife or whatever else it is. And then there's this sense of missional living. Actually knowing the presence, God is with me and my ear is open. He cares about things happening all around me, and He knows the people all around me and what they're going through, even though I don't. But if my ear is open to Him, He may actually invite me to partner with Him today in being a blessing. Are you with me? So those 4 things, and I hope it's intensely practical as we go. But let's talk about fearless living first and just dive in. 2 Kings chapter 6, it says, once when the king of Syria was warring against Israel, he took counsel with his servants, saying, at such and such a place shall be my camp. But the man of God, Elisha, sent word to the king of Israel, beware that you don't pass by this place, for the Syrians are going down there. It's an ambush. They're trying to set an ambush for him. And the king of Israel sent to that place about which the man of God told him. Thus he used to warn him, so that he saved himself there more than once or twice. And the mind of the king of Syria was greatly troubled because of this thing. And he called his servants and said to them, will you not show me who of us is for the king of Israel? Who's the spy among us? There's no way that he can know all of the ambushes we set up, every place we set him up, and he's always ready for it, knows about it. Somebody is telling him what we're doing. You catch it, right? And one of his servants said, none, my lord, there's no spy among us, O king. But Elisha the prophet, who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the words that you speak in your bedroom. And he said, go and see where he is, that I may send and seize him. It was told him, behold, he is in Dothan. So he sent there horses, chariots, and a great army, and they came by night and surrounded the city. So I don't know how he knows what we're doing, what we're planning, all of the ways we want to bring terror and attack against this nation, but for some reason he always knows there's got to be a spy. No, king, there's no spy, but there's this man of God who is super aware of everything you say. He's actually right there in your most private place, aware of what you're saying, even what you're thinking. Whoa. Now, you would think maybe for a moment that should frighten the king a little bit. Don't you think? How would he know that? Like, how does this man over in Dothan know what I'm talking about in my bedroom? That should stir up probably a different conversation for him on the inside. Like, there's God and he knows and he's aware and maybe I should know him. But it doesn't. It's like, oh, let's go get rid of the problem. Let's go take him out. So they send a great army, it says, chariots and horses, and surround the city by night. Major, major problem. So we meet a character named the servant of the Lord, servant of the man of God, who is very unaware of the presence of God in his everyday. It says, when the servant of the man of God rose early in the morning, he went out, and behold, an army of horses and chariots was all around the city. And the servant said, alas, my master, what shall we do? And that's what I would say. Anybody else? Oh no! We are surrounded. The situation is dire. There is no way out of this, whatever this is. You don't have to talk about warring armies. Just make this real for a moment. Make it personal. Ever been afraid? Ever feel like you're up against a circumstance that is bigger, stronger, greater than you, and there's no way out of it? That's the moment this servant finds himself in. He looks, and literally there is an army surrounding the city, and it's not little, it's giant. Chariots and horses, there's no getting out of this. What do we do? Now look at this fearless man. Here's Elisha. He says, do not be afraid, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. Can't you see it? What are you talking about? It's one of those crazy pie-in-the-sky Christians who lives like their feet are off the ground and like there's no reality. Anybody ever accuse somebody of not living in reality? Anybody ever accuse a person who has no anxiety and is not stressed out of their gourd and not terrified like you as if they're not living in reality? Anybody? Okay, just take notice here for a moment here. This is what's happening. You better believe that servant is going, you do not live in reality. And yet he lives in total reality. But he couldn't know that. There's no way to know that he's in reality. How? Because he can't see what Elisha knows. There's more with us than with our enemy. And so he says, Lord, please open his eyes that he may see. Would you let him see? So the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. Something totally different, a completely different perspective is suddenly in his eyes. What he was unaware of, what he could not see, what he did not know, that Elisha knew. Whether or not Elisha actually could see all of that, probably didn't. He just knew God is with me. It's the same thing that causes David to stand and say, God's going to defeat this Goliath, when the rest of the army of Israel couldn't move forward. It's the same thing that Caleb said when he stood up and said, we surely can take the land because our God is with us. And all they saw were giants and were grasshoppers in their eyes. It's this understanding, this perspective. When I can't see and I don't recognize the presence of God that is with me. It's a game changer to know he's with you right now in whatever you're going through. Whatever it is, right now, God is with you. Circumstance is not what it seems alone, because God is here. So it says the Syrians came down against them, and Elisha prayed, please strike this people with blindness. He struck them with blindness in accordance with the prayer of Elisha. And Elisha said to them, hey, this isn't the way to the city, and this is not the way to the city. Follow me, and I'll bring you to the man whom you seek. And he led them all the way to the capital of Israel, the capital city of Samaria. So they come against them, and Elisha just prays, I know God's with me. Why don't we do this? Why don't you just make them all blind? And now they're blind and totally terrified. You went from seeing to not seeing. Nobody can see. Everybody knows we are in like big trouble. We're at war. We're coming against you. We're at big trouble. We can't defend ourselves. We're completely, right now, right? We're basically disarmed. he says, hey, follow me. And he takes them to the city. As soon as they entered Samaria, Elisha says, oh Lord, open the eyes of these men that they may see. So the Lord opened their eyes and they saw, and behold, they were in the midst of Samaria. Just say, oh no. Now go ahead, give me an oh no. Say, oh no. Yeah, this is like a big oh no moment here because they realize they're now surrounded. They were trying to surround, now they're surrounded. They had the sight, now they lost their sight, and now they can see again, and it's not a good situation. Completely their perspective is finally flipped. As soon as the king of Israel saw them, he said to Elisha, my father, shall I strike them down? Shall I strike them down? And he answered, you shall not strike them down. Would you strike down those who you've taken captive with your sword and with your bow? Set bread and water before them that they may eat and drink and go back to their master. So he prepared for them a great feast. And when they had eaten and drunk, he sent them away. And when they went to their master, and the Syrians did not come again on raids into the land of Israel. Whoa, totally different scenario. 3 things from this little, just real fast. 1, God is present in your privacy. That was one of the things the king of Syria had to learn real fast. God sees everything. He actually knows what's going on. Conversations you're having in your bedroom. Understanding the presence of the Lord does stir up in us a fear of the Lord, an honest fear of the Lord. It's what Paul was talking, so we make it our aim to please him. Because we know one day we'll stand before the judgment seat of Christ. Hey, Lord, you're with me when I think I'm alone, when I feel like I'm alone, when nobody else knows. Nobody knows my thoughts. Well, I know, you know my thoughts. Psalm 139, you know my thoughts. You know my words before they're even on my tongue. You know everything about me. You have searched me and you know me. That does something to us. There is a reality. Okay, God, you are aware of my life. Now, here's the really cool thing about that. That could either frighten you or overwhelm you at the grace of God. Frighten you if you don't know God, like, oh my gosh, I can't get away with jack nothing. But if I do know God, and I believe that he still loves me, that he could love me, he knows me and loves me. Nobody else knows you like God knows you. A lot of people might actually like you, maybe even love you, but would they still love you if they knew everything God knows about you? You can either live in the fear of that reality. By the way, real love is yes, they can. Real love is yes, they can. Real marriage, covenant love is yes, I know everything about you and I love you. I love you in your faults and I love you in your strengths. That's real marriage. But God literally knows everything about us and still says, I love you, and demonstrated it that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Everything we did and would ever do, he saw all of it and said, you are still worth dying for. You are who I love. That's craziness. That's awesome. It's beautiful. Anyways, God is present even in your fears. The servant of Elisha learned this. God is present even in my fears. The things that seem overwhelming, God is even in that. And every one of those things that seem overwhelming change once I recognize God is here. We did 2 series about this last year, 2 series on how God is with us and the significance of that. He's in my boat in the storm. He's standing on top of the storm. He is with me in every aspect of my, God is with me. How powerful that is for fearlessness. And third, God is present in your conflicts. Probably the best part of this was because they learned and recognized that God was present. Those that they thought were threats, these raiding bands from Syria, this army of Syria, this threat, my enemy at work, my enemy online, my enemy in the family. That threat, who's the threat? That even the threats became opportunities. And instead of killing an army, instead of going to war, they were able instead, because God was with them, they didn't need to be afraid of an army. And if God is with you, you don't have to be afraid or threatened by people in your life. Instead, you can love them. They did the opposite of what you would do. You with me? The opposite. What was it? We put bread and water before them. We prepared a feast for these guys. They were coming to kill. They have been killing. They've been raiding. They've been terrorizing. And instead of that, instead of giving them in like, we chose to give them something else. We actually did. This is Old Testament picture of what Jesus did for us. We actually did what Jesus did for us. And we gave them what they don't deserve. Mercy, grace. Are you with me? And that affected the relationship. Every time we choose God's way in relationship, like we talked the last few weeks, you reap life. When you sow the kingdom, you reap life every time, but you can never sow to the flesh, to what seems like what I should do, to unforgiveness, to bitterness. You can never sow to that and reap life. Every time we sow to that side, we reap death, every time. A couple more things real quick. Everyday living. The awareness of God in my everyday living, every day. In Luke chapter 10, famous story. Some of you know it. It's a little bit misunderstood sometimes, maybe. But here you have the story of Mary and Martha. As they went on their way, Jesus entered a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. And she had a sister named Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to his teaching. And Martha was distracted with much serving, and she went up to him and said, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Tell her to help me." But the Lord answered her, "Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things, but one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen the good portion, which will not be taken from her." I think what we miss is the juxtaposition here. We look at the doing side of life and the being side of life, and we go, Mary did the being thing, and that's good. Just sit. God is in the sitting. And obviously, God is not in the doing. Because look at Martha, right? And we kind of juxtapose these two against each other in the two aspects of our life, the being and the doing. Everybody's involved in being and doing all day long. Are you with me? Being is what you can contemplate, where you're at in here, in this space, your settledness. The doing is the things you got to do. I got to do stuff all day long. This is real life conversation now. And I think what we're missing is this aspect. It wasn't that being is better than the doing, or Mary was better than Martha. It was that Martha felt alone in the service. My sister has left me alone to serve. Alone. But to recognize the presence of God in our serving is a game changer. In the everyday, mundane life, going to work, picking up around the house, tending to little kids, the everyday stuff of life, we have sometimes created this picture through a story like this, that if I'm busy doing stuff, I must not be aware of the presence of God. And if I want to know about the presence of God and be aware of the presence of God, I have to stop. And if I only get 10 minutes to do it, then crud, I got a really cruddy presence of God story in my life. And the truth is, he just wants to be present in the doing, present in the being. Jesus, his whole ministry is marked by the awareness of the presence of the Father. Everything. I have so many scriptures, I don't have time to give them to you. John 5, John 8, maybe we'll read John 14 here in a minute, but it's John 16. I only do what I see the Father doing. I only say what I've been told to say. I literally am doing the works of my Father who sent me. Everything Jesus did came out of this understanding of the presence of God with him in the doing, and also in the alone times where he got away to spend time with the Father. He had a rhythm of both in his life. Sitting at the Father's feet, coming in prayer, going alone to be alone with the Lord, and working for the Father. But in all of it, he saw the presence of the Father. He was aware of the presence of God. And you can actually find tremendous joy in the doing, serving part, the mundane part of your life, if you just simply learn to recognize God's presence while you're doing it. Now, how do we do that? Brother Lawrence, some of you know the book that was kind of written about him, an interview with him, Practice the Presence of God. It was just all about trying to understand how did Brother Lawrence get to this place? He was a monk, and he just had learned to be aware of the presence of God in everything that he did. And he literally says, in the most mundane parts of life, of serving, of working, this is where I can meet with God the most. Because prayer doesn't have to stop when devotions are over. Prayer is an ongoing conversation with God. And it's just these writings about this interview with him and how he sees the world, and that God can be present in everything I'm doing. And when I'm teaching, when I'm at work, working, when I'm at home doing dishes, when I'm changing a poopy diaper, like I can be in conversation with God throughout my day without having to stop once I close my Bible from a morning devo. The presence of God is available to me. Why do we miss it? Well, it's because there's certain tools, there's these things, we get so busy. How many of you are ever distracted by stuff? Anybody? You get caught, you get the day going, you have great intentions, and then you just get spun in different directions, and the phone is ringing, and everything's going, and it's like, and it's like, I get home at the end of the day, oh man, what a day. What a day. And it's like, Lord, where were you throughout I didn't even. There are little tools that can help us learn to be aware of God's presence throughout the day, in the mundane. Little tools like, I have it in my phone, little reminders. Every day there's reminders. Reminders of the daily office. You saw the EHS is going to be starting up here very soon, another round of EHS. We do this every year, a couple times a year. Why? Because it's such a helpful discipleship conversation with tools that help us learn to be aware of God in our soul, his presence. What's going on in here? Where is God leading me? What is fighting against God's presence? What is the awareness of this anxiousness? Notice that it describes Martha as distracted, anxious, and troubled. Do any of those ever describe your day? Distracted, anxious, or troubled? Yeah. And if that's the case, what Jesus was inviting Martha into was the experience Mary was having with, I am present. And because I'm present, there's no need to be distracted, even in your serving. There's no need to be anxious, even in your serving. There's no need to be worried, even in your serving. What was she worried about? Will he like my food or not? Right? What was she worried about? I don't know. How he would think about her. Was her house clean enough for him? What was her worries? I don't know, but that's the normal stuff of life. I'm preparing for this sermon all week long, and I'm going, this different style, God. It's hard for me to put the pieces together. I see it all over the New Testament. It's everywhere in the Bible. How do I anchor this? What do you want? How do you want to say this? How do you want to present this? I can't just go walking up there with some tools and walk in the church through tools on a Sunday. It's boring. This is real conversations going on in my soul this week. How do I please the people who like expository teaching? How do I please those ones who like a good topical, but they got to have good stories so that they can relate to it? How do I make everybody in the congregation happy with your message about learning to be aware of your presence? These are real things. And what do? They cause anxiety, trouble, distract the mind a bit. It's like, just relax. You've been preaching for 25 years. I've met you every time in that. How about I just meet you again? Doesn't have to be a home run. Just go get a base hit. So I can get a single. I read the passage. That's a single by itself. Just go get a single. Don't be distracted and worried about. But here's what you're learning, what we're learning, how to be aware of all of that going on in there. Because you don't have to start the day and then the day is over and go, where was I? Where were you all day? Or just come to church on Sunday and think about the week and review my whole week once a week. So much happened this week. What he's inviting us into is what he promised us, and really all through, but certainly in John 14, he promised us this helper who would be with us, who would be walking with us every day, all day long, never leaving our side, who could counsel us, is one way to translate the word in the Greek of helper, who could counsel us or come alongside us or be a guide to us all day long. In our dishwashing, in our diaper changing, in the board meetings, in the investment opportunities. He says, I'm here. I'm right here. You need some help? That's what I do. I am with you in this. Everyday living. Henry Nouwen described prayer as thinking and living in the presence of God. Sometimes we think of prayer like it's got to be on my knees, or it's got to be this way, or I got to do some rote prayer, or it's got to be just thinking of prayer so simply is thinking and living in the presence of God. He wants it to be so normal for us. In John 14, talking about godly living, he says, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. I'll ask the Father, and he'll give you another helper. Parakletos in the Greek. You've heard that term before, some of you haven't, but it's kind of a packed picture of all those things I said. He's going to be with you forever. He's going to be with you. He's going to be with you today when you leave here. He's going to be with you tomorrow morning. Even the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive because it doesn't see him. It doesn't know him. But you know him, for he dwells with you and will be in you. I'm right here. Everything I do is through the empowerment of the Holy Spirit. He's my connection to the Father. This is going to be your reality. He's with you. He's going to be in you, living in you, walking with you. And then he goes on, jump down to verse 22. Judas, not Iscariot, one of the other disciples, said to him, Lord, how is it that you manifest yourself to us and not to the world? And Jesus answered, if anyone loves me, he will keep my word, and my Father will love him, and we will come to him and make our home with him. Whoever does not love me does not keep my words. And the word that you hear is not mine, but the Father's who sent me. He says, here's what happens when you begin to recognize and are living in his presence. living in this constant awareness of his love, it leads us to a life of obedience. When I'm aware of the presence of the Spirit of God in my life, when I acknowledge his presence and I learn just to talk with him throughout my day, it leads me to live a life that wants to please him. I don't want to ignore you. I want to please you. This is what Galatians was talking about 2 weeks ago. When you say, hey, let's live in step. Let's walk in step with the Spirit. If he lives in you, let's walk in step with him. It's right after that whole fruit of the Spirit conversation. This is what comes out of the life of a person who's walking in agreement with me. This is what comes out of your life. Let's walk in step with him. You can't be open to the Spirit's presence and his love and continue to walk according to the flesh. I think one of the easiest ways to see this in our life is how we treat people. People in our life. It's a really easy way. We know God is crazy about people. He loves them. He loves the lost. He loves the farthest ones from him. He told us really clear, I came to seek and save the lost. He gave us pictures of what that looks like as far as someone could be from God. He said, that's the one I'm after. I came for the sick, not for the well. Oh. I leave the 99 and go after the one. Like, I am passionate about the lost. And they'll know that you know me by the way you love each other. And the new command I gave you is simply this: love each other as I've loved you. You want to know where you're at in this whole walk with Jesus, this whole walk with God. You can see it very clearly in the way that you love each other. That is the greatest picture to you of where you are in your spiritual maturity, is how well do you love like me? And where you don't, the places where you give your soul to not agreeing with the Spirit of God and walking in step with him. I want you to catch this picture. This one kind of hit me as a picture. When we turn our soul to the presence of God in our life, this conversation, you're with me. Here we are at work now, loving these people together. Here we are in my home, loving these kids. You know, I'm doing dishes and I'm starting to get disgruntled and I realize, oh, you're with me in this. Oh, I get to serve. Like I get to clean up the poop in the backyard that the kids said that they would do. But I get to do all the chores that they said they were going to do and they promised to do that they never did. And how come I have to do all of it? I'm with you. Oh, yeah, wait. Troubled about many things. Okay, yeah, you're with me in this. Hey, as we do this, would you remind me of all the poop you clean up in my life? And he's with me in it, right? He's with me in this. So he's with us in it. And I forgot where I was going with that. Anyways, it was really good and profound, I'm sure. But when we turn our soul away from God and toward the flesh, I just want to be angry with this person. They hurt me. They hurt somebody I care about. Well, hey, we have this opportunity to forgive and to move toward a healthy relationship, to reconcile that, to make it you know, where you get in a hard heart toward them, where you want to distance yourself from them. Hey, you want to kind of be okay with feeling a little bit distant from them and write them off in your life. Hey, listen, I have a better way for you. And we have to like literally say, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in this because I'm hurting and I'm angry and I'm mad and I just want to lean into that some more. That's when we turn to the flesh. How do we treat people around us? That is the classic for us. Godly living is like wrapped up in a lot of things, but it's how do we treat each other? In Luke 9, James and John, you remember that. They were offended because the Samaritans didn't receive Jesus in his ministry. And these two guys say, hey, should we just Jesus call down fire from heaven and kill the whole town? You just imagine Jesus, now patient probably as he was. It says he turned and rebuked him, and some of our translations will include this phrase, you don't know what spirit you're of. Like you turned your soul away from the Spirit toward the flesh. And what you want to do feels right to you. I mean, it felt so right to them, they had no problem even saying it out loud. Think about that. To Jesus. Here's our solution. Kill them all. Kill them all. Right? It's like, do you know which way you're facing right now? Hey, let's turn back over here and remember what our mission is. People. Remember the people? This is who we love. Yeah, but the people. Oh, yeah. And that's that last simple point is missional living. It totally affects our missional living. When I say missional, it's just this sense of I'm on mission. Every church plant, by the way, God bless all of them. When you plant a church, if you know a church planter, when churches get planted, there is this super aware consciousness of missional living. Why? Because there's nobody at our church, right? And the only way people will ever show up here is if we build a relationship with them. And so there's like this awareness of how are we going to reach a community, reach a city? Or when you go on a missions trip. Anybody ever been on a missions trip? Let me say it this way. Who's never been on a missions trip? Awesome. I hope you have your passports. This is going to be your year. Come on now. Let's solve that right away. But something happens to you when you go on a missions trip. You somehow think missionally everywhere you go. Right? It's day one of the missions trip, and you go to the airport differently than the last time you went to the airport. The last time you went to the airport, it was all about getting through the lines as fast as you could. Annoyed with every TSA worker who slowed down, went to take something out of your bag, or any other thing that it was an inconvenience to you, or whoever cut in the line. Cut in the line, taking you out, right? This is how you were in the airport because that's just where you were in that space. Now you go on a missions trip and you're there with your team. You're going on a trip, might be wearing matching t-shirts, say like Kenya or something like that on it, or Jacaranda, and you go to that and you're like, I'm on mission. Someone wants to take cuts. Hey, God bless you, go ahead. Hey. Instead of like, who am I going to sit next to? I'm going to put my things on, my ears on as fast as I can so I can tune out the world. When I get into my seat, it's like, hey, who's going to sit next to me? What? Because I'm on mission. I'm ready. Here I am. Who do I want to talk to? And then you get to wherever you're going. And it's from the taxi to wherever you're staying. Every person you encounter all along the trip is like, you're all a potential why I'm here. Am I right? It's just this awareness because I'm on mission. And that is exactly what we've been called to live in every day. And I get it how it's like we come in and out of that, right? But that's what we've been invited into. This is the context, this picture in Colossians when he says, walk in wisdom toward outsiders, making the best use of the time. Let your speech be seasoned. Be gracious, always gracious, seasoned with salt, so you know how to answer, how you ought to answer each person. You know, in my phone, there's another reminder that pops up for me every single day, and it says, where did I partner with heaven today? This is just my phrases. These are things I'm like, Lord, help me to stay aware everywhere I go. Every Starbucks I walk into to read, every place I go to study, wherever I am, to be living on mission. We made these a massive labor of love for some of our team. Our whole bunch of us came together to make this. This is called the Tools for the Journey Journal. And it has 7 disciplines with tools for each discipline. 7 means of grace, ways that we can learn to be aware of God, to grow in this awareness, who he is, what he wants to say to us, all that stuff. This is here. It's been a lot of years in the making, and it's finally available. They're on sale for $5 in the lobby. So grab a copy. If you can't afford a copy, take a copy. It's not about the money, that just covers what it costs to make it. But this is a tool, helpful, hopefully, It's got a lot of tools in the back, but in each section, there's a QR code that you can scan, and it takes you to a website that we've created with a bunch more resources. The Prayer of Examine is one. I don't have time to talk about it. I'm just giving you a name, a title. It changed my life. It's just a way of learning to be aware of the presence of God. What did he do throughout my day? The Prayer of Examine it could be a game changer for you in learning to be aware of God. The daily office we talk about in EHS can be a game changer for you in learning to be aware of God in the middle of my day, morning, afternoon, evening. Some of you, I can tell you right now, you eat 3 meals a day. You could change the way you think about that prayer before you eat. From a how fast can I get it out so we can get to the meal to a just simply stop and pause for a second. And what should I be grateful for? What happened today that I could say thank you for, God? Even that slow, steady awareness will help you stop and remember God in your life. But he wants you to be aware of his presence. And there's many tools that will help along that road. Would you stand with me?